Okay, Isiah Pacheco didn't play last week, a shoulder injury. I wrote here that CEH just continues to be awful. And McKinnon, I just doesn't get enough usage. So I think if Pacheco's out, it's a whole disaster. Why don't you talk about, his injury and how maybe you would handle, this backfield situation?
Well, if we remember last week when the injury was announced, Andy Reid did not dismiss the potential of putting him on the IR, which is telling us that it wasn't nothing. And then this week we're getting reports, no, he's not going to go on the IR. He's dealing with a contusion or a bruise. So if it truly is a bruise, I expect this to not be too much of an issue. And possibly he could play this week. If not this week, definitely next week. But again, a contusion is what the Browns labeled Deshaun Watson's injury as, when in reality it was a full-blown rotator cuff tear.
Right.
That's not the fracture that took him out for the season. I'm talking about the injury before that. So I'm not saying that the Chiefs are lying about his injury, but I'm saying that we already have seen an example this year where a team labels an injury a shoulder contusion when really it's a rotator cuff tear. Either way, he should be able to play through it, because he is not a thrower, so he should be able to do what he needs to do as a runner pretty well. And typically upper body injuries don't impact fantasy stats, especially for running backs. The only possible issue I see here is Pacheco's running style. He's a battering ram. He just lowers his shoulder and runs right into people. So I could see Kansas City reining him back from a snap standpoint to protect him from himself, to protect him from getting that injury even worse as they're getting ready to make a playoff run. So if he does play this week, I could see a world where he doesn't score his typical amount of points just because his snap rate is lower. Still probably worth starting, but more on like a flex end versus like an RB2 end.
So temper expectations a little bit. I fully agree with you there. Any reactions to that crazy Bills Chiefs ending? I mean, I know you were on vacation and stuff, but
yeah, I don't understand what the Chiefs were complaining about. Like, Tony could not have been more offsides. It was
a million percent.
It's sure the refs usually. I get the one consistency from the refs. If you're gonna give the guy a warning, there's offsides, do it all game. But still, it's Tony's responsibility to be on sides, and it's Mahomes' responsibility to make sure his guys are on sides.
Yeah, it was. The Chiefs are a team that frequently gets a lot of calls. I'm going to sound like a parent. I was disappointed in Mahomes and how he handled it after, but also I really do adore him. And he came out and really apologized after. He was just super fired up, but he was well off sides. I just don't see what the issue is. I guess they're just fired up. Now that play was actually
insane. A sick play.
It was disgusting. Travis Kelce's the best. I mean, it's just a disturbing play. All right. Let's keep it moving, man. Let's go to Aaron Jones, who is dealing with a knee injury. Talk about a disappointing season. Guy hasn't played since week 11. He's RB 47 on the year. And in his absence, Dillon continues to be mediocre in that starting role. But what do you think? Is he still going to be in that starting role? I know you always talk, Tom, about how the Packers slowly bring their players back. But what do you got for Aaron Jones?
Yeah, and that's the problem. And when Jones got hurt a few weeks ago, we talked on the show about how he may not be trustable rest of fantasy season. So now we're entering week 1 of the fantasy playoffs, and sure, he may play. We still don't know. He was limited in practice today, but he was limited last week as well. But what we do have a pretty good idea of is that even if he plays, he's not going to see the field more than 35-40% of the snaps, which will really limit his upside. Of course, he could score still. Of course, he could catch some balls. But we're not going to see elite production, most likely, unless he has a couple plays that just he goes off on. From a volume standpoint, we're not expecting a tremendous amount. So depending on what other running backs you have, you really need to consider keeping Jones on your bench this week, because if history tells us anything, he's going to see 35 or 36% of snaps like he did the other 2 times this year in his first game after an injury.
I'm not trusting it. I don't want to lose my playoff matchup because Aaron Jones has 7 carries for 31 yards and that's it, and he's off the field.